Good morning, learner. My name is Dr. Arya, and in today's channel-based counseling session for the MBA program, today I will be covering another session of MMPC 12, that is strategic management. And as you can recall, that in previous sessions we discussed in detail about the strategy, strategic management, strategy formulation, and before that, strategy related what type of analysis are required, especially internal environment analysis and the external environment analysis. Then subsequently, a different strategy or the level of strategy we understand. And in today's session, we will be talking about the strategy implementation and its control. So let's talk about the last block of MMPC 12, that is strategy implementation and control. And within that, unit number 10, we will be covering first, which is implementation behavioral dimensions. That will be covering with an objective to understand the concept of strategic change, role of leadership in strategic management, discuss about the concept of leadership and various functions of the leaders in the business environment. And we will also try to understand the different leadership styles and the importance of ethics and values in the context of the strategy. So let's begin the concept that can help us in understanding the term of strategic change. So it's very common phenomena that organizations are facing a lot of changes in day-to-day working conditions. So at the same time, you will notice that it's not static in nature. It means the business environment, as we have discussed, is highly dynamic. So it means kind of change will take place maybe in an organization, maybe in an industry, maybe in a specific sector. So how and to what extent these changes can be addressed is something that we are talking about, the strategic change. So in this case, we can say that each organization has an independent working style, and therefore the strategies with respect to the formulated for these organizations are also different. It can't be unique at all. And therefore, different levels of strategic change is highly dependent on the nature of the strategy that the organization is referring to, and it is going to make a major implication with respect to any other type of organization. And therefore, the strategy implementation process involves a large number of people, tasks, business units, and products. And to move from a stable strategy to organizational redirection, it requires a lot of efforts and implementation processes that are quite complex in nature. and therefore it becomes very important for the organization to adopt to these type of change which from time to time occurs and addresses a kind of a strategic change through which we can address it. So, when we talk about the matching organizational structure with respect to the strategy, then a common question arises is that how to match the structure to the needs of the strategy of the organization. So, just to answer to this particular question, three important aspects need to be considered. First is the strategy to critical activities. Second is degree of authority, or we can say the level of centralization or the decentralization in an organization. And the third aspect, again very important, that is providing for the coordination. So let's talk about each one of these in detail. The first aspect we need to discuss about the strategy and the critical activities. So there are, one important aspect is the kind of critical activities which can't be ignored. Means there are some critical tasks and functions which must be critical in terms of re-examining. And as an example, if we refer like tight cost control, so cost management is something that has to be essentially addressed, and therefore it is essential for an organization pursuing the strategy of low cost leadership to address this particular issue, and therefore this activity is highly critical to the organization. The second type of activities in an organization could be the routine activities. And the moment I am saying the routine activities, it means it can be either support type or it can be more of a maintenance in nature. And as an example, if we refer like handling payrolls, maybe accounting related activities complying with regulations that are on organization specific, maybe sector specific, or maybe regulations of a specific country that one need to comply to, maybe managing cash flows positions, and it can also include like controlling inventories, safekeeping of stores, training of manpower, public relations, market research, etc. So ultimately, we will see that these are very nominal and routine activities. So there are two alternate questions that should be, help in terms of identifying strategy critical activities. First could be that what functions have to be performed exceedingly well for the strategy to succeed. And second question that arises that need to be answered is that what are the areas where less than satisfactory performance would seriously endanger the success of the strategy. And from this point of view, the second aspect, other than the strategic critical activities, was the degree of authority, or sometimes we also refer it as the level of centralization or the decentralization. So, in that particular case, this particular aspect addresses two alternative approaches that can be followed by the corporates. The first is the centralization, and the second is the decentralization. So let's understand where and when the organization emphasizes the centralization and where exactly the organization emphasizes on the decentralization. So centralization is a kind of strategic decision making authority at the corporate level, and they delegate only operating decisions to the unit managers, and the core decisions are taken care at the top level, that is at the corporate level. But at the other hand, if we compare the kind of decentralization or the degree of authority, so in that case, it is to substantially decentralize the strategic decisions to the unit managers, with the corporate staff who are providing necessary support to them are given to. And in that particular case, the corporate office may limit its role to certain kinds of strategic decisions only, and rest can be uh, given to the unit managers. Now, question arises like what degree of authority to consider, the centralization or the decentralization. So it further need to be understood from the some of the critical aspects like is it essentially a question of managerial judgment and would depend upon a number of factors like the, the kind of merits and demerits of decentralizations in each situation must be properly weighted before emphasizing on decentralization over decentralization. And maybe after taking into consideration the principal decision the business unit managers make and how the corporate manager or the corporate management perceives the importance of the various units in the overall strategy of the organization. And the third aspect was the in terms of providing for coordination. So this is a kind of principal way in order to position the various activities in the vertical hierarchy of authority, where the managers higher up in the hierarchy generally have broader authority over several organizations units, and this enables them to have more power to coordinate and integrate or arrange for the coordination of the units under their supervision. As far as the business units are concerned, the general managers are the central points in collaboration because of their position, that is, the higher position of authority over the whole unit in an organization. Similarly, apart from the positioning organizational units, along with the vertical scale of managerial authority, a general manager can also achieve coordination of strategic efforts through informal meetings, special task forces, standing committees, and 6 monthly or say quarterly strategic planning, budgeting, and review meeting processes. While formulating the strategic plan itself, a general manager can solicit the cooperation of other general managers in the planning process, and this would provide for inbuilt coordination bridges right from the very beginning. Now, this strategic change and its three important aspects has let us has given a kind of option to understand the leadership and the role of leadership or the types of leadership that perceived in corporate houses. So we need to understand the leadership from the strategic management perspective. So Warren 1984 has defined leadership as the capacity to frame plans which will succeed and faulty to pursue others to carry them out in the face of all difficulties. If we refer the different functions of leadership, then it can have different functions. Like one could be like functions for the needs of the task, like mission, objective, or goals, which can further emphasize upon the defining the task, making the plan, allocating work and resources, controlling quality of work, checking performance against the plan. And that is a major way of making a comparison. The other function of leadership could be for needs of the individual, where it can emphasize more on in terms of attending to personal problems, praising of individuals, knowing individuals personally, recognizing and using individual abilities, and training individuals. After that, another important function of leadership can be towards the needs of the group. In that case, the leadership can play an important role in terms of setting standards for the groups, mentoring disciplines among the groups, building team spirit, encouraging, motivating, giving a sense of purpose to the group for the organization, appointing sub leaders, ensuring communication within the group, and training of the group. If we refer the leadership styles, the way the leader behave, they respond and they act, it can be understood from different type of leadership styles that are one can notice. So in past or maybe in the future, you will notice that different organizations have different ways of leadership the managers are adopting to or they are following to, like the directive leadership, the autocratic leadership, strategic leadership, charismatic leadership, coaching leadership, like that, visionary leadership. So in that case, there is a no effective leader over ever consciously adopts a specific style. It comes naturally from within, and therefore we are saying that a specific leadership style is something that it won't be staying there. Depending on the situation, the leadership style can also be changed by the managers considering the situation. Three important leadership styles very commonly noticed in the corporates is the autocratic, second is the laissez-faire, and the third is the democratic one. In the case of the autocratic leadership style, more emphasis is in terms of the employees follow the orders and the top management they make the decisions. And in that particular case of the autocratic leadership styles, the employees simply follow the instructions or the orders given by the managers, and they are not considered for a specific unique ideas that they might be having too. In the case of democratic, on the other hand, which is the reverse, where the employees' ideas are considered and it is given a weightage, and the group makes decision based on a kind of encouragement or a kind of contribution of the other members. And in that particular case, the viewpoints of others, especially the employees, are considered or giving some emphasis. But in the case of the third type of important leadership style, that is laissez-faire, the employees make decisions, and in that particular case, you will notice that the managers have a minimum interference and guidance from the top management. In that particular case, the more authority or the options are lies with the employees itself. Now, based on the leadership concept, leadership styles, we also need to understand the concept of corporate culture, whether the strong corporate culture is being followed or it's a kind of weak corporate culture. So corporate culture is a kind of value or the kind of belief accepted and practiced by all the employees of the organization, and it can be categorized into two types. One is the strong corporate culture where the employees have a strong commitment towards their organization. On the other hand, if that level of commitment is not that strong, then that lead to a weak corporate culture, and that is something not supportive uh, from the corporate culture point of view. At the same time, if we try to understand the concept of ethics and values, then strong culture is based on strong ethics and values in an organization, and where the ethics is the moral philosophy of an organization, whereas the values are the moral principles of an organization. And the purpose of these two, that is ethics and values, is in terms of ensuring that an organization doesn't adopt shortcut methods to achieve success. Instead, it stresses on the concept of sustained success. And from this point of view, every organization has its own code of ethics and code of standards, which very commonly observed in an written form. Now, the code of ethics usually contains some of the parameters or the discussion on some of the parameter, like the level of honesty that the organization is referring to, fairness in practices of the organization, maybe in terms of disclosing the inside information, maybe acquiring and using outside information, disclosure of outside activities by the employer to the employee, maybe using organization assets, etc. Here, the values statement also normally include like value of the customers, maybe the commitment towards the business practices like the quality that they are offering, maybe the duty towards shareholders or the supplier, etc. And it can also include the environmental protection related norms and to what extent they are being followed. With this, we are now at a stage where we can discuss about unit number 11 of uh, block 4, that is strategy implementation and control, where emphasis is on the corporate governance. The objective of this unit is in terms of understanding the concept of corporate governance and the business ethics. Subsequently, we will also be discussing about five major pillars uh, which are addressed under the effective corporate governance, the drivers of corporate governance, and some important models of corporate governance, very prominent these days, are discussed. So let's begin the concept to understand the term corporate governance. So corporate governance is a kind of set of standards, or sometimes we call it as a kind of essential, which is concerned with the process by which an organization is governed or managed. So the corporate governance are some sort of standards, policy or procedures or the aims for the purpose of improving the organization image, maybe the level of efficiency or its effectiveness and the social responsibility of the organization. So from that point of view, the corporate governance is emphasized, and it is primarily realizes on complete transparency, integrity, and the accountability of the management, with an increasingly higher focus on investor protection and the public interest. So, from that point of view, one important definition has been given by Cadbury Committee, that is, chaired by Sir Adrian uh, Cadbury. And in this particular report in 1992, the corporate governance has been defined as a system by which organizations are directed and controlled. Now, since we have discussed the corporate governance, it is also important for us to learn the concept of the business ethics. As we discussed the ethics now, as well as the values. So in that particular case, if we club and if we refer it from the point of view of the business, then ethics is a kind of demarcation between what is right for the business and what is wrong for the business. And from that point of view, the moral values and a certain course of conduct which are presumed to be followed by individuals as well as in organizations are somewhere considered as the specific values or business ethics related values. So in this particular case, business ethics is the application of these ethical principles in an organization. Five important pillars, as we discussed, from the corporate governance point of view, that make it more effective are considered. Among them is the accountability, and that accountability is at all level, not just at the top level, but at the middle and the lower level. The second aspect is the kind of the fairness, that is by way of treating all stakeholders or all the parties, all the associates equally without making any kind of demarcation or the discrimination. The third pillar of the corporate governance is the transparency. Here, the level of transparency is in terms of disclosing the relevant information for the credibility point of view of the organization. The fourth important pillar of corporate governance is the integrity. That happens through the professional culture that let each employee to perform the best he or she can perform. The last pillar is social responsibility that benefits organization and the society at large. Now, we need to discuss the different unique models of corporate governance that are considered as the leading models of corporate governance. The moment we are talking about the models of corporate governance, it means the kind of practice, the kind of regulations, the kind of mechanism being adopted through these models in different countries, where it can have a kind of composition, it can have a mechanism of appointing of board of directors, or sometimes we call them as the think tank of an organization, or the board members. Excuse me. So in this particular case, different countries have different regulations towards the corporate governance, and therefore, selectively, 4 to 5 important models are considered as the very prominent models in the corporate governance. One is the Canadian model. Second is Anglo-American model, or the UK model too. Third is the German model. Fourth is the Japanese model, and fifth is the Indian model. So we will be first discussing about the Anglo-American model of corporate governance, which is also known as the shareholder-oriented model of corporate governance. And in the visual, you must be seeing that a company not just owned by the shareholders, but they are also having some other important stakeholders like the creditors, shareholders, legal system. So in the case of legal system, they regulate the company. They regulate the company by framing some important rules. So in the case of US, this is something that a US market is adopted, this model. So Security Exchange Commission is one such important regulator which defines the way the organization can be listed. Similarly, the state legislation can also frame important rules in this regard. Similarly, the other important stakeholders, they have a stake in the company, and most important, the shareholders, they are the real owners of the organization, and they nominate the board of directors, and they are the supervisory, and this subsequently appoints or supervises the middle level managers. We are calling them as the officers, and they are ultimately managing the companies by the lower level managers or the officers. Now, if we refer the features of the shareholder-oriented model or the Anglo-American model of corporate governance, then it is the basis of corporate governance in some of the dominating countries, including Britain, Canada, America, Australia, and Commonwealth countries, including India too. So, in this particular case, the shareholder rights are recognized and given more importance. Here, the shareholders have right to elect all the members of the board, and the board directs the management, that is the middle management, and they subsequently work on behalf of the top management, what the policies that they frame. And here, the directors are rarely, independent of management. The companies are run by professional managers who are negligible ownership stake in the company. The clear separation of ownership and management is also noticed in this model of corporate governance. And the institutional investors like the banks and mutual funds are portfolio investors. When they are not satisfied with the company's performance or the level of structure, they simply withdraw their stake, maybe by selling their shares in the market, and they quit from it. And in this model, the disclosure norms are comprehensive, and rules against the insider trading are very high in terms of the stringent rules. At the same time, the small investors are protected, and the large investors are discouraged to take active role in the corporate governance. The second model of corporate governance is the German model of corporate governance. It is also known as the European model, and it is also very much famous with the name two-tier board model. As you can see, that two board structure is there in the visual. One is the supervisory board, and second is the management board. And the important aspect in this case is that not the shareholders who are the real owner, but also the employees and the labor union. They have a stake in terms of appointing the supervisory board. So even they have a equal weightage in terms of appointing. So it means 50% supervisory board members will be coming with the nomination of the employees and labor union, whereas the remaining 50% will come from the real owners, that is the shareholders. And the composition of that supervisory board subsequently appoints and supervises the management board, which include compulsorily the labor relation officer, which is more of a representative of the employees and the labor union. And in that particular case, the management board subsequently handles the day-to-day management or the affairs of the company, and they report back it to the supervisory board. So in this model, the workers are considered important stakeholders, which was not there in the case of the Anglo-American model. And in this case, the company and they are having the right to participate in the management of the company, that is the workers. Here, the corporate governance is carried out through two boards, as we discussed, and which is the supervisory board and the board of management. And in the case of supervisory board, the shareholders elect the members of supervisory board, and employees also elect their representative for supervisory board, which is very commonly 50% to say one third of the total board members. On the other hand, the board of management or the management board, it's supervisory. This is something that the supervisory board appoints and monitors the management board. And here the supervisory board has the right to dismiss the management board and reconstitute the same. And now we can refer the third model of corporate governance, that is the Japanese model of corporate governance. And this Japanese model of corporate governance is again something reflect the position of the financer or the fundraising institution or the one who contribute the fund to the company, that is the banks. And in this particular case, not only the shareholders, but also the banks who provide the fund plays an important role. As you can see in the visual, that at the top of the organization, that is company, the supervisory board is there, which include the position of the president. And here, uh, the supervisory board subsequently uh, elect or define the position of the president, who subsequently having another set of board or a kind of executive management, which is known as the primarily board of directors. And in this particular case, they are subsequently having the managers who are the actual functionaries of the company. So in that case, the supervisory board is subsequently having the president, which consult with the president or the president consult with the supervisory board in terms of making a specific policies or consultation related to various important issues. Here, based on the consultation with the supervisory board and the president further discusses or consults the matter with the board of directors, that is the executive management, and they subsequently give the orders to the managers on behalf of the company. So in this particular case, the role of main bank or the financial institutions who provide the financial assistance to the company provides the managers, and those managers are the specialized managers. And in this particular case, you will notice that the banking and other financial institutions have a very crucial role in terms of the framing the corporate board structure, as the Japanese companies raise significant part of capital through these banks and financial institutions. And since the banks and other institutions stakes are very high in businesses, therefore they also work very closely with the management of the company. The shareholders and main bank together appoint the board of directors and the president. In this model, along with the shareholders, the interest of lenders is also recognized to the very high extent. Now, if we refer the Indian model of corporate governance, it is more of a mix of Anglo-American and the German model. So you will notice that in India there are three major type of companies, that is private, public and public sector undertakings. And each of these companies has distinct kind of shareholding pattern. And thus the corporate governance model in India is a mix of Anglo-American and German models. Now, based on these models, and the five important pillars of the corporate governance, the major challenges that is commonly noticed in the corporate governance is among some of the areas could be like the board appointment, whether the appointment of board or the board of directors is something biased or based on biased appointment, or is it something fair? So that define the major challenge for the organization. Second is in terms of the performance evaluation of the directors. What mechanism the corporates are having in terms of uh, monitoring or evaluating the performance of the directors. The third is in terms of the appointment of the independent directors. Fourth is the removal of independent directors, accountability towards the stakeholders, and the role of promoters, transparency related organization, the resolution to those conflict, trust if occurring, what is the best way solution can through which it can be the deadlock situation can be overcome. So these are the major challenges. Now, excuse me. So we are now discussing about the control chapter, that is unit number 12. And in this case, the objective of this unit is in terms of understanding the concept of strategic control process and the importance of strategic control in terms of the evolution, maybe by also understanding the different methods used in control process and the follow-up action for these control. So let's understand first the concept of a strategic control process. So you must have noticed that organizational processes by which the top management needs to keep check on how well the strategy is being implemented to achieve the objective of an organization is something that the organizational core processes are. And therefore, the strategic control process is closely associated to the strategic planning process, and therefore it is consisting of three important phases. One is the evaluation criteria, second is the performance evaluation, and third is the control method. So let's understand each of these in detail. The first is the strategic control process. So it determines what to control, and for that, a kind of standards, that is the uh, set standards, that is the set control standards are defined, and after that the actual performance is measured, and further that the comparison will take place between the control standards and the actual performance. And once it is compared, then one will be able to notice that what is the level of that deviation and what were the major reasons of those deviations. If those reasons are identified, then they can be corrected towards a corrective actions. And the second phase is through the operational control, and here the operational control usually ensure that specific tasks are performed effectively and efficiently. And these operational control can include like the financial controls, budgeting, management by objectives, and time control. So we will learn each one of these here. So the financial control can be referred through, say, DuPont's system of financial control. Maybe with the help of the accounting ratios, this financial control can also be taken care of. The second aspect is the budgeting, which is a kind of plan of income and expenditure that the organization is usually, considering well in advance, and it gives an idea of future expenditure and the income that the business is going to generate and utilize to. And it also classified on the basis of time, monetary unit, function, and the flexibility. The third aspect is the management by objectives, MBO. The objectives are usually established for the organization as a whole, for functional areas, departments, and finally, individuals of the organization. And therefore, the last aspect is the time control, which usually helps in project planning and the control for that. Two important network analysis related tools like PERT and CPM, that is critical path method, and the program evaluation and review techniques are used. Now, if we refer the performance standard concept, then standards against which an actual performance is to be measured are the performance standard, and they usually reflects results that are expected when a work or say task is performed satisfactorily. And the performance standard has three important types. One is the historical standards, in which the past performance is compared with the present performance. Similarly, in the case of the industry standards, the comparison of an organization performance is made against similar other organization in the industry, in the same industry. And the third type of performance standard is the present standards. In that particular case, the goals are decided by the organization's management, which is to be achieved in a particular period. And if we refer the analysis and follow-up action of control, then you will observe that once the actual operations start, information about the actual performance has to be collected periodically, and it need to be compared with the standard set. When the actual performance on key success factors is unsatisfactory, the long-term success of the strategy may be endangered. And therefore, two course of action are possible in that situation. The responsibility center manager may be asked to improve performance, or if it is not possible in that scenario, the target or the standards of performance may be revised to address that issue. Now, there are certain problems of the control system that one need to address too. The common problems that are encountered in designing and managing control system are very commonly like there may not be a consensus on the criteria for measuring the effectiveness and efficiency of the strategy. There may be a kind of reporting data is something that it is not valid one. The performance norms may be based on outputs on which the relevant business may not have a control. Subsequently, often performance standards may be set with inherent contradictions. Maybe the employees may consider the system to be unfair and therefore will not accept it. Maybe the situation of overemphasis on measuring short-term performance that may make managers forget about the strategy, which inherently has long connotations. And in another scenario, it is sometimes also very difficult to set good, average, or poor levels of performance in situations where the outputs are not very tangible. So, in this scenario, the types of strategic control can emphasize about the strategic control, which is a kind of term that describes the process by which organizations control the formation and implementation of the strategies. And for that, four major type of strategies that control are there. One is the premise control. Second is the special alert control. Third is the implementation control. And fourth is the strategic surveillance. So let's learn each of these strategic control. So in the case of premise control, you will notice that every strategy is founded on certain planning premises or set of assumptions. So in the case of premise control, it is intended that to examine whether the assumptions that has been taken at the initial stage on which a strategy is based are still valid or not. And if it is not, then it need to be reassessed. In the case of second type of strategic control, that is special alert control, a particular alert control uh, is the rigorous and quick reconsideration of an organization's plan, that is towards or in response to an instant or unanticipated incident that can address to such kind of situation. The third type of strategic control is the implementation control. Here, the implementation control must be implemented as the events develop, and it is having two forms. One is the strategic thrust or project, and second is the milestone review. In this case, the strategic thirds give a kind of information that may be useful to assess if the overall strategy is progressing as per the expectations or not. But on the other hand, that is the milestone review, one may track the strategy's success at a regular interval. Now, the fourth type of strategic control is the strategic surveillance. This control is more of a kind of monitoring a wide variety of events, both within as well as outside the organization, and that is likely to have an impact on the direction of your strategy. Now, we need to discuss the last unit of this course, MMPC 12, that is the evaluation of the strategy. And within this unit, we will be covering some concept like understanding the process of evaluation, business portfolio analysis, importance of qualitative measures which are used for the evaluation, the concept of balanced scorecard, the characteristics of an effective evaluation system. So let's learn the process of evaluation first. So for that, the key to a successful strategy is the effective implementation and the evaluation system. And in that case, any kind of error in the strategic decisions will ultimately harm the organization, which in the long run may be highly dangerous to the organization. And therefore, it is very necessary for the organization to have a continuous evolution system which can be based on the corrective actions that may take place by the top management or a specified manager designated for these kind of aspects. Now, if we, within that process of evaluation, if we refer the success point of view, then the success of an organization is gauged by its effectiveness and efficiency. Here, the effectiveness is measured by the degree to which the organization has achieved its objectives, while on the other hand, the efficiency refers to the manner of resource utilization by achieving the output. Therefore, the effectiveness is a relationship term between the output with the objectives. On the other hand, the efficiency is a relationship term between the output with the input. Now, we here reached at the stage where we need to understand the business portfolio analysis and its relevance. So, portfolio analysis is an analysis of the organization as a portfolio of different businesses that is being handled by the organization with an objective of managing it for the returns on its resources being utilized by the organization. So in this case, you will notice that the manager analyzes the future implications of their present resource allocations and continuously evaluates which operations or products to expand or add, and which ones to be curtailed or disposed of, so that the overall portfolio balance is maintained or improved to the extent of the expectations of the organization. Here, uh, some important types of business portfolio analysis have been identified. One is the BCG's the growth share matrix, also known as the Boston growth matrix. The other is the McKinsey matrix, that is the GE's strategic business planning grid. Third is the Strategic Planning Institute's metrics. Fourth is the Arthur's The Little Organizations metrics. And fifth is the Hoffer's Product Market Evolution metrics. So we will be discussing one of that metrics, that is BCG's growth share metrics. Here, this matrix is having two dimension to refer to. One is, as you can see in the visual, that one side is emphasizing on the market growth. On the other hand, the market share of a specific product or the company is referred to, where four specific situation has been identified, like if the market share is low and at the same time the market growth is also low. So this situation is something within the BCG's growth matrix is showcased or identified as a situation of the dogs, which means the market share is low, at the same time the market growth is also low. And in this particular situation, the market presence is very weak, and the situation is something that the organization within that product line or within that particular product is very difficult to make margins. That is the profit. And therefore, it's a situation where one can have an option of liquidate. The other type of situation is where the market growth is high and at the same time the market share of that product of the company is low. So it is identified as question mark. And in this particular case of question mark, the market share is low, but the market growth is towards the higher side. It means it showcases a kind of opportunities no one knows about what to do with these opportunities, and at the same time these opportunities need serious thought as to whether increased investment is required or to what extent it can be utilized. And therefore this type of situation give a kind of reminding to to divestment. Similarly, it also give a kind of position to select a few one over the other options. The third type of situation under BCG metrics is a kind of cash cows, where you will notice that the market share of that product is high, but on the other hand, the market growth is not high. It means market growth is low and the market share of that product is high. So it's a situation where you will notice that the product is well established. However, the market isn't growing as per the opportunities that one is analyzing, one is observing, because they are very limited in nature. Therefore, we are saying that cash cows position is something that the market share might be high, but at the same time, the market growth opportunities are very limited. And the fourth type of situation, which is something very prime for the organization or for the product of the organization, is where the market share is also high and at the same time the market growth is also very phenomenal, very high. And that situation is identified or termed as the star situation. And this is something that shows that the firm or the product of that firm is well established. And these are the fantastic, and there are fantastic opportunities available to the firm for subsequent growths. And in that particular case, the stars or that situation can further make the investment. So this BCG's growth share matrix try to identify four different situations where the correlation or the linkages between two important variables are identified. One is the market growth and second is the market share. So high market growth with low market share if is there, so a different phenomenon will be there. But at the same time, if the high market growth is there and high market share is there, then a different phenomena will showcase there. So it's a kind of star situation. So we have reached to the end of our discussion of block number 4, that is strategy, implementation, and control. And for that, the the question arises like the what kind of characteristics of an effective evaluation strategy one can refer to. So for that, different type of activities or of evaluation must be economical. If we refer from the point of view of the control, or maybe from the point of view of a effective evaluation strategy point of view. The second characteristic that one can refer is the kind of information that it should neither be too much, or it should neither be or not it should be too little. So sufficient information should be available. Based on that, a specific evolution can take place. And therefore, again, as we have discussed earlier, that within the control mechanism, the standard and the actual performance, if both these aspects are something not has been defined or not has been assessed uh, properly, so in that case the control may not be identified, or control mechanism may fail or collapse. So the third characteristic of an effective evaluation system could be in terms of the control should neither be too much nor too less. And it means that the control should be something balanced one. The other characteristic of the effective evaluation system is the evaluation activities should relate to the organization's objectives. It means these type of activities should relate to the core objective of the organizations, based on which the organization has tried to set the objectives, and these strategies are subsequently implemented and assessed. The last and important characteristic of effective strategy implementation or evaluation strategy is like it should be designed in such a manner that a true picture is demonstrated. And this is these are some of the basic characteristic that applies, that implemented. And we have reached to a level of the conclusion of this session, where let me just give a brief of today's discussion, where we discussed about the strategic change. Then subsequently we refer the concept of business ethics and the corporate governance, the five pillars of the corporate governance we referred. Subsequently, the dimension of different models of corporate governance we discussed, like the Anglo-American model of corporate governance, the model of German model, where two clear hierarchies noticed. Then we also discussed about the Japanese model, and then from the Indian model of corporate governance, a mix of the Anglo-American and the German model we have seen. Then further, in the last two units, we have tried to understand the concept of the leadership as well, We also try to understand the different control mechanism and the some of the important strategy implementation and its evolution related aspect we discuss. So this is all from my side today. Thank you very much.